new but intense desire to gag uncomfortable voices of dissent. I am not intolerant, say many people. I'm only intolerant of intolerance. And people tend to nod sagely and say, oh yes, wise words, wise words. And yet if you think about this supposedly inarguable statement for longer than 5 seconds, you realize that all it is advocating is the replacement of one kind of intolerance with another.
I don't really know how many more ways I can say this. Said it, keep saying it, but somehow or another, it doesn't seem to get through. And I'm not sure why, but I'm going to try again. The idea of banning an idea, any idea, is a bad idea. It's not the way to handle things. If you may allow me a moment, I'd like to borrow from the concepts that Julian the Apostate hit upon once upon a time. We don't have time to go into all that history, but the blood of an idea that gets martyred is the surest way to ensure its survival. What do I mean? Banning an idea is always about power and control. The only variables involved is who is seeking that power and why. That's it. Doesn't matter. You ban an idea, you ensure that it will survive. You ensure that not only will it survive, but it very well might thrive. Isn't that weird? Well, I told people not to think about that, not to say that, not to believe that. And why are people still believing it? It's bizarre. Yes, there are bad ideas in the world. I get it. There are bad ideas in the world. There are bad ideas in politics. There are bad ideas in science, in medicine, in politics, in history, in baseball. There are bad ideas. But the way you counter those bad ideas is not to say, you cannot think that. The way to counter those ideas is to come up with something better. It's the same thing we say about free speech, isn't it? The counter to bad speech is more good speech. If someone is saying something that I don't like, and by the way, let me be very clear about this, I don't like it is not a logical argument. It's not an argument for, well, that should be banned or silenced. The only criteria for opposing something like that is it correct? Is it right? If it's not, then you should be able to prove that it's not. And if you can't prove that it's not, well, maybe you need to rethink the idea. Back in the 1600s, the church hated Galileo's ideas. What were those ideas? That the earth revolved around the sun. That's it. That's the idea. That's the grand thing in the sky that Galileo came up with. The church hated that idea. And we could spend a lot of time talking about the theology of why. Even Martin Luther, the founder of Protestantism, claimed that the idea of a heliocentric solar system was laughable, wasn't biblical. After all, he reasoned, Joshua commanded the sun and the moon to stand still, not the earth. That was his logic. The facts didn't matter. The church itself went after Galileo and essentially told him that you needed to cool that. You needed to stop. So Galileo's response to that was to write a book in which he portrayed a conversation between two people. One, a learned, educated, and intelligent person. The other, a dolt. Now, he gave the characters names, which is probably where he went wrong. He named I don't remember what he named the intelligent character, but the dolt he named suspiciously close to the Pope. He used a name that was basically, this means the Pope. And spent page upon page mocking the idea that the Earth was the center of the solar system. And this was unbearable. The Pope that hitherto had actually been pretty much okay with Galileo's position. In other words, the crime of what the church did to Galileo isn't that they just silenced him. It's that they knew that he was right. They'd already talked about it. He'd already presented this to the Pope. The Pope had already encouraged his work. They understood that he was correct and that he was opening new scientific vistas. But the problem is, we can't have the people hearing this. We can't have the common man, the illiterate populi of the streets, hearing this. Because if they hear this, and if they read Galileo making fun of me, well, they might start questioning other things. The banning of an idea is always, same with speech, always about power and control. Always. They locked away one of the greatest scientific minds of human history. They didn't lock him away because he was wrong. They locked him away because they didn't like his ideas. They didn't like the idea that his idea might become commonplace. And it might lead to questions. There are numerous examples throughout history of this kind of attempt to silence an idea. Sometimes there are subtle ways of doing it. For example, the 13th Amendment is a subtle way of correcting a thought process that existed, that African Americans were subservient and beneath white Americans. Well, no man is a slave. We're going to do away with that. Oddly enough, I know this will sound strange, but after fighting a 4-year war, sacrificing 300,000 men and countless millions of dollars to end the idea that slavery was a good idea, passing a constitutional amendment, oddly enough, the idea didn't just go out of existence. People still believed it. We told you can't believe that anymore. No, I can't. So we passed another amendment, the 14th Amendment, to redefine some things, to reapproach those things. Those mindsets remained. We didn't get rid of that idea, did we? 1945, with Germany blasted out of existence, basically, we began a process known as denazification. You probably heard this before. George Patton's famous, hey, I'll use anybody that can keep the trains running, for not firing Nazi officials. We got this idea that we would get rid of all the Nazis. And that way, Nazi ideology and idealism would vanish. It would go away. The world would see what had happened from such an ideology. That didn't work, did it? Those ideas, banned though they may have been in a subtle way, and in some ways legally, didn't go away. 1954, Nikita Khrushchev takes over the Soviet Union and embarks on a process known as de-Stalinization. And maybe you've heard of this, maybe you haven't. There was this backlash against Joseph Stalin, who had been dead now for some time, but the idea was to get rid of the overzealousness of the Stalin era. They changed the names of cities. They did away with it. They put people who were Stalinists in jail, in the gulags, thinking to themselves, oh, the Stalinist idealism will go away. And what do we have today? We have a card-carrying member of the Stalinist organization, Stalinist hardliners. If you ever played the old game Kremlin, sitting in the Kremlin, running things. The ideology didn't go away. 1964, we passed the Civil Rights Act. Why? Because there were too many people who seemed to have the idea that we don't care about slavery being banned. We don't care about citizenship. We don't care about any of that stuff. We still think we're superior. So we passed laws saying, no, you're not. In the words of the song, we passed law in 1964. It didn't go anywhere. It didn't really accomplish what we thought it would accomplish, did it? Those ideas behind that opposition to that stuff didn't go away. We made progress, but they didn't go away. 1991, communism was defeated. Remember this? I do, because I was in the military. I was there for the parade. Virginia Beach, right down Virginia Beach Boulevard, I think, past Mount Trashmore, tanks, troops, the whole 9 yards. We defeated Iraq and we defeated communism. We had this grand celebration. Fall of the Soviet Union. Communism is defeated. And what are we talking about today? What are we most concerned about in the CTR world, conservative talk radio world? Oh, the rise of socialism. You know why? Because ideas, bad or otherwise, don't go away. And if you pass a law making them go away, trying to make them go away, it just makes a martyr of the idea. Christianity was outlawed once upon a time in the world. Did it go away? No, it didn't. And in fact, it took Julian the Apostate, the nephew of Constantine the Great, to kind of figure that out, to kind of figure out that, you know, if we stop killing Christians and stop outlawing them stuff and stop, maybe we'll stop making martyrs of them and their ideas. There is also a second consideration when it comes to the ideas. It's a more complex, and that is what happens when an idea is just flat out wrong or just a bad idea. More often than not, throughout human history, there has been an attempt to ban the idea. We think to ourselves, oh, if we just tell people that they can't think that way, then everything will be fine. See? Everything will be cool. But it never works. As we've talked about, give me an idea in human history that was banned, that was said, you can't talk about this ever. You can't even think about this. That went away. You can't do it. Now, you could argue that, well, of course not, Dave, because it was banned. We don't know nothing about it. But the reality of it is that has never happened. It's never worked. You make a martyr of an idea, just like if you make a martyr of a person, you expand things. I've been thinking a lot about this lately because this idea that the blood of a martyr is the seed of faith. When you kill an idea, when you stab an idea, when you ban an idea, when you get rid of it, all you've really done is planted the seed for someone else to make it grow. In the same way that a martyr dying for his cause or his or her cause does the same thing. I think there's some correlation and some thought process that needs to go into that, and particularly when we think about the last year and the approach that people are taking about police violence towards African Americans. Are we making martyrs, or do we really have a problem? The idea would indicate to me that we're making martyrs, but that's just a thought that I had about some other things. This idea of banning ideas, regardless of how repulsive or how repugnant or wrong they are, is a surefire way to attract attention to them. And when you're dealing with the human mindset, when you're dealing with human nature, you're going to create a situation where those people now, whether they've even thought about the ideas, because of their opposition to the status quo, will glom onto an idea and become to believe it. You don't think that happens? Well, look at history. Over and over again this happens. Over and over again. All this comes about because of my appearance this week on Bill Mick, Monday mornings, 5 a.m., regarding this idea of Oklahoma banning critical race theory from being taught in its public education system. Look, I get it. Critical race theory is a badly flawed theory. It is a horrific idea in the sense of, well, number one, it's racist, but number two, it's racism in its worst form. It's racism cloaked in the idea of anti-racism. It's absurd. Logically, it's absurd. But the only counter to that, it doesn't matter if I say that, because anybody that believes in CRT is going to say, well, Dave, you only say that because you're white, you're racist. Well, that's circular logic. I mean, it really is, but you can't argue with it logically. In that sense, people who believe it aren't going to be persuaded. So if we ban the idea, will it go away? If we ban critical race theory from the state of Oklahoma or the state of Idaho or the state of wherever, will it go away? No, it won't. So what's the response? What do we do in reply to critical race theory being taught? Well, if it's even being taught, I can't find where it was actually being taught. I find a lot of discussions about it being taught. I find a lot of proposals for it to being taught. I don't find anywhere where it's actually specifically in the textbook that's being used, this is critical race theory, you're white, you're racist. I haven't found that yet. Now, that doesn't mean it's not coming. Doesn't mean it's not proposed. Doesn't mean it's not being discussed. It means it's a possibility. But if I ban it, then what? I mean, we've banned plenty of ideas. In the 1920s, we banned the theory of evolution. The state of Tennessee banned the theory of evolution. Did you know this? So you probably know this. Can't teach the theory of evolution. The state of Tennessee said, and if you do, we will arrest you and we will fine you. And so some teacher, guy by the name of Scopes, was a substitute teacher. And he said, well, I think I did. Sorry. Sorry, not sire. Got arrested, got put on trial, and in what was clearly the circus trial of the century, of the 20th century. A trial that was so bad that by the time they reached the end of it, the defense basically said to the jury in their closing arguments, look, this judge has made so many screw-ups and so many ridiculous rulings that we have no case. So you might as well find him guilty, because that way we can go on and appeal and get this straightened out. And that's what they did. They found him guilty because he taught evolution. The thing is, he didn't know he was teaching evolution. He really didn't. I mean, he wasn't sure. He's like, well, just read what was in the lesson plan. Oh, the lesson plan that the state of Tennessee provided the teacher after saying you can't teach evolution, but you must use this textbook, had a whole chapter in it about teaching evolution. All he did was teach the lesson plan. Wait, what? Yeah, that happened. Supreme Court of Tennessee starts reviewing this trial, and they, much like the local court there, came up with some ridiculous rulings to uphold things. Oh, yeah, it's not about this. It didn't violate First Amendment. It didn't violate 14th Amendment. But they ultimately struck down the law that said you can't teach evolution. Do you know why they struck it down? On a technicality. What was the technicality, you say? Was it that the textbook contained... No, it wasn't that at all. It was that the jury imposed the fine. Yeah, the jury imposed a $100 fine on Mr. Scopes for teaching evolution. And by Tennessee law and by Tennessee Constitution, the most a jury could impose was $50. Oh, they did twice that. Well, it's unconstitutional. Throw the whole thing out. And that's how it ended. And neither idea that was argued about in that courtroom, whether it's creationism or evolutionaryism or theistic evolution or whatever you want to, there were multiple ideas being argued. None of those ideas have gone away. Because we take the time to talk about them. We take the time to study them. We take the time to learn. And if our children are exposed to ideas that are bad, how do we counter that? I can't keep Ben in a bubble. I just can't. Maybe I'd like to, but I can't. He's exposed to ideas that are far beyond what I even know. It's easy to say, well, it's just school, Dave. It's bad school. They're giving him ideas. No. At best, Ben is in school 6 hours a day, and that's, at best when things aren't crazy. A good third of that is recess and lunch. Some of that's music class. Some of that's PE class. Some of it's, English, diagramming sentences. How many ideas is he actually being exposed to? A couple here and there. You know where he's really getting exposure to stuff? The same place you're getting exposed to it. On the net, on the television, from his friends. There's a line in the movie True Lies. Remember when Harry is really upset because his daughter is stealing from his partner, and he's like, I'm a bad parent. Dude, you're not her parent. Her parent is Madonna and MTV. That's where she's getting the ideas from. And how are you going to counter those ideas? I'll say this to you point blank. Countering critical race theory being taught at school is easy. I look forward to that challenge. That's going to be a piece of cake because that's a simple, logic, straightforward thing. Countering society and societal cultural ideas gained in other places, that's a real challenge. That's a far bigger challenge. But the idea isn't to ban them. The idea isn't to say, MTV, you can't play that video. YouTube, you must remove this. Facebook, don't let Donald Trump be on here because we don't want his ideas out there. That's not, all that does is guarantee that ideas that you don't like will survive into perpetuity. I was trying to say that and I couldn't come up with it, but my lips move too fast sometimes. Sorry. All you do is martyr an idea and you plant the seed of eternity with it. That's all you've accomplished. You ban CRT in schools. You use an emergency decree to do it. You ban it. All you're doing is making a martyr of it. And ultimately, you've missed the point of how to beat a bad idea. You've missed the point of how to counter a wrong idea. Just like the church, you've locked away something in hopes that it won't get out. Well, it's never worked, and it never will.